It's a rainy day in May. I'm going to show you what I have going on in my garden. I have 3 pawpaw trees, 3 peach trees. This corner used to be a mostly unused space, so I filled it with as many flowers as I possibly could. I have daisies right here, cosmos, black-eyed Susans, a bunch of others that I can't even remember, lily right there, and this is a grapevine that I planted. I think this is a green variety of grape that's growing up the wall here. I plan to possibly trellis this over to the edge of the roof here, and then maybe I could create like a little arbor between the 2 edges of the roof here. I also have other grapes on this side. On the other side of that hot tub, I have some grapevines growing up there, and here's one of the grapevines that's growing up this string that I have going up to the edge here. And I want to get it to this point and then trellis it across this whole roof right here. I have 2 more grapevines right there going up these strings. And then I have these amazing purple flowers, and I'm actually not entirely sure what they are, but they're perennial vining purple flower that comes back every single year. They're really cool looking. Here's the other side where that hot tub is and the grapevines are growing up. The big maiden grass right there, and I have a few mulberry trees coming up that I haven't taken out. I'm thinking I might just let them grow up here and grow up to a height where maybe they could support the grapevines. I'm actually doing that in another part of the yard. I'll take you up to the other side of this fence and where the barn is. I have a grapevine over here that you can see has kind of taken over this mulberry tree. It wasn't leaning like this actually the other day, but my thought was to have this mulberry tree grow up tall there to the edge of this wood deck, and then the grape could, obviously it's attached itself, but the grape could then spread onto the deck and maybe even up higher and provide a little bit of shade in this corner of the deck where I have a pool area up here. Now obviously this grape has kind of taken over the mulberry tree and it's out competing for growth, and it's planted right next to the mulberry tree, probably way too close for any traditional plant spacing requirements, but the mulberry tree was a volunteer and the grape I planted before that. So I just let everything grow up and do its thing. I don't like to take plants out until I know exactly what they are, and if I really think that they need to come out, if they're invasive like some type of honeysuckle or something like that. So I may just support this a little bit. We'll see what I do. But below that, I have these sunflowers that I planted, and I have these along the fence here. I have some down in there. On the other side of this pool equipment, I have a few more sunflowers, and my thought was to have a bunch of sunflowers in this corner of the yard. And then also over here on the edge of the barn, it gets enough sunlight. The sun comes from this direction and it hits all of these sunflowers here. So I've got a bunch of them right there on either side of this tunnel that I put up. And at the base of this tunnel, I have a few things planted. Right down here, I have a nice looking little black cherry tomato plant. I have another one over here. I also have, this one actually has a couple flowers on it right there. There's another cherry tomato plant with a few flowers on it. Most of them are black cherry tomato plants. And then behind those cherry tomato plants, at the base of this trellis system, I have even more sunflowers that I wanted to grow up along this fence line and just have everything look really lush and green on either side of this trellis. Now, on this side of the trellis, I have a thornless blackberry bush right here that I wanted to grow up here. I also planted a few things that could potentially grow up this cage here, like some lemon cucumbers, some Armenian cucumbers, right in here on the edge where I planted sunflowers. You see, I'm planting everything super dense, really close together. We'll see how it works out, but I just don't like to leave any open ground wherever I can possibly do that. Now, on the edge here, I have, this is a heritage raspberry plant that's been growing for over a year. This is its 2nd year growth, and raspberries send out fruit on the lateral shoots from the 1st year growth. So you can see this darker piece right here, it's sending out lateral shoots, and that's where the raspberries are coming in here. So I'm actually gonna get a crop of raspberries this year, which is awesome, and Fiende is enjoying this tour as well. Now the thing with raspberries you have to be really careful of is they can spread. They send out little shoots all over the place in the ground. They're actually coming up in there with the sunflowers that I planted, And that's okay at the base of this cage, but if you have an area where you don't want that to happen, well, it's a possibility. So these are fine here. I found some more way back there in the bushes. I took those and I put them on the other side of this trellis. There's one right here, one right here. Raspberries are incredibly easy to grow. I highly recommend it if you're considering something that can kind of just take over an area. Just give them some support going up and make sure you have maybe like a lawn area where you can cut it with a mower, and you know, it's an area where if they spread out a little bit, it's gonna be fine. Now, walking through this back arch, my plan was to have sunflowers on either side, one on the fence here, some here. Obviously, those are doing better on this side right there. They're getting a lot more sun hitting them, and this fence is probably shading out the ones here, but they're still coming up here and there, and I put some other varieties of shade-tolerant flowers in there that I'm hoping will come up as well. Coming up to the back of the fence, I also put sunflowers. I wanted this just to be, you know, walls of sunflowers everywhere you look. We'll see how everything comes in. But then right here, this is a volunteer little maple looking type of tree that is coming up, and I'm just gonna leave it. I like to leave trees and let them come in wherever they can. And then that is looking over to my back garden where I have big ferned out asparagus patch with some little mock strawberries growing in there. And then even more of these arches and tunnels, along with a couple beds back there, a big flowering rhubarb plant through the asparagus. So I'll take you back there and we can check it out. So here's the arch system that I built. It was pretty simple to build. I'll talk about that in a second. But in these beds, I'm trying to fill them with as much as I possibly can. I have just some cool season crops, some radishes. That looks like actually a volunteer sunflower coming up. I like to leave those wherever possible. And then I have a lot of other garlic and onions. And this year I planted what's called Egyptian walking onions. They're a perennial onion that grows up and it creates an onion bulb at the top, and then that lays over into the ground, and that self-propagates and they continue to make more onions as time goes on. So here's what I'm talking about. I'm now back in that bed, and this onion would grow up and then create a bulb at the very top that would lay over into the soil, and then that bulb would root down into the soil and create an entirely new onion plant. Now, I'm not sure actually what is my Egyptian walking onions and what is just normal red onions and yellow onions that I planted, because I have so many in here, but I'm gonna find out as soon as they start to create their little bulbs here. And these radishes, I planted a bunch of them in here. They're a nice plant to just throw in a mix, and some of them are flowering. They're creating these little seed pods that are going to turn into flowers, and I really like to leave those flowers wherever possible. I'm doing the same over here with some broccoli that's actually been in the ground for a couple years now. I thought it was kale, but it turns out it was a broccoli plant, and it created a little seed head right here, and you can see all those yellow flowers. I'll take you over and we can look at that. So this is the base of the broccoli plant, which is really hard and woody because it's been growing in here for, this is its second year growing. One here that didn't make it, but this one did, and it created all these new little shoots. And you know, the new broccoli that it created second year probably wouldn't have been very good, and it was just these tiny little shoots of broccoli, and I let those go to flower, and now look at this. I have tons of flowers here for the pollinators, and then these will, you know, go to seed and then drop down in the bed and hopefully create new broccoli plants right down there in the soil without me doing anything. So that's a lazy gardener's method. Now here's a look at the beds on either side of this tunnel system, and I have a huge plant of rhubarb that's going to flower. I'll give you a closer look at that in a second, but my plan here was to have along these edge of the tunnels here to have a bunch of tomato plants and cucumber type plants. In the middle have some more flowering plants and artichokes, and then maybe some brassicas here and a bunch of garlic. And that's what I have, garlic that's been in here for a couple years now. I actually didn't harvest this the first year, and I just let it do its thing. I kind of spread it out here and there when I saw it coming up really close together. So like here, you can see a bunch of garlic really kind of too close together to get a really good size head out of one of these. But you can take these in the early spring and you can transplant them, or even do it in the fall if you want, and they will take off and become a nice big thick stalk of garlic here. Now at the base of these, like I said, I'm planting, I have a little tomato plant right here. These are just really young and just starting to come up. This is some kind of cucumber. I planted a mix of like Armenian cucumbers, lemon cucumbers, and cucamelons down at the base of these trellis systems. I haven't had all my plants do really well from transplanting initially, so I put even more seeds. I just like to overseed areas and let things come up, and that's just starting to happen here. Now this is a lemon cucumber that's getting some more steam after we've had some rain here. He's putting on some new leaf growth, and I'm hoping he'll come up this cage system right here. This is a jalapeno that I actually just got from one of the big box stores. I just threw a couple of those in. I like to get pots from the big box stores that have like 2 of these plants in them always, and then I separate them. I tear the roots apart. I'm pretty rough with them. It doesn't matter. They're gonna survive. If you give them the right conditions, you can do that, be a little bit harsh, and they'll come back. Now here at the bottom of this trellis system, I have a couple more tomato plants. A couple of them have a little bit of damage. It's been raining hard here, but you know, I'm gonna take off these lower leaves as I have been doing, get them away from the soil where the diseases are most likely to occur, and get them up on this cage and growing up all the way to the top so that I'll have a nice green, lush wall of tomato on either side of this, and cucumbers growing together, and you'll walk through here and hopefully it'll just be really green, lush, and nice. Another thing I'm doing with these tomatoes at the base is I'm planting in a bunch of onions right here, and I have garlic in other areas, and those help repel pests and disease that are likely to attack tomatoes. Now behind that is my massive rhubarb plant, and each one of these stalks produces a giant leaf that's not edible, but the stalk itself is edible. And I'll go in here and grab one of these. You can see that stalk. That's what it looks like. And if I take a bite here, these produce a massive leaf, and the stalk is completely edible. It's pretty tart flavor. If you put it in something with strawberries, like a rhubarb strawberry crisp, it actually balances out the flavor really nice. Or if you just want to do rhubarb alone and you like it tart, it's kind of like a lemony, really tart flavor when you bake it into stuff. We've been doing that lately with it. So big leaves here. And what I do when I harvest this rhubarb is I remove the stalks, but then the leaves themselves, I've been putting those in this little path right here, well, in between where my grass is and where my plants are growing, to try and help suppress weeds that may get up in there. I'm doing an experiment here because I had all these beds lined with logs, and I have that on the other side, and I just wasn't as big a fan of it, honestly, because as the grass starts to creep in, it'll creep in between the cracks of the logs. I'll show you what that looks like. Here, what I can do is just manage it with a weed whacker, and then also put a bunch of grass clippings so it continually suppresses it. But when you have logs here, right here, you can see it just starts to creep up in those cracks in between the logs, and it's just hard to get like down the edge with a weed whacker. And even if you were to get right down in there and cut it really short, well, it's just going to keep coming back and just creeping slowly up in there, and you kind of would need to mulch as well. I think weed whacking and mulching together would be a more ideal strategy. But just look at those massive evergreen trees, first of all, in the background look great, and then this rhubarb plant with the giant leaves, and then it's flowering this year, which is really cool. These little hanging seed pods that it produces here, they're a very interesting shape. And I guess, I don't know for sure, but I mean, I assume you could take these and plant more rhubarb plants with the little seeds that come off the rhubarb. Now, the previous owners of this property did a really good job with the front yard, planting all kinds of native perennials, and I knew they had a garden back here, but when I came, it was just grass. So I converted it to all of these gardens that you see here, except for that rhubarb plant and the asparagus. That was already here. That's the beauty of having perennial food systems in place. They will benefit for multiple owners, multiple generations to come. And what I did was, from the front yard of this property, I took some of those native perennial flowers and I put them in some of these beds in the middle center aisle here. So like this is an echinacea flower, and that'll come up and make a really beautiful scene here for the pollinators. Now this is a mulberry tree, and it's growing right there at the base next to one of my garden beds. And I've had a few people tell me I'm really gonna regret having this here, but I just have a hard time taking out mulberry trees or any trees that are coming up, even though I know mulberry trees are maybe not always the best for certain locations. But my thought here is just to maybe manage it. I'll like prune all these branches back, and then on the other side, if I go through the gate here, I'll prune some of these low-hanging branches back, like from here down. And then the taller branches, I was thinking of taking those and arching those and leaning those down onto this fence, and then having a tunnel here of green that I could walk through on the other side of my garden and food systems. And here's a little mulberry here. I'm allowing him to come up too. I thought it might be cool on the corner of the pool here to have that growth, and then have this mulberry tree and have a little shade area in the corner section of the pool area. Now here's a look from the back of the property. You can see I have a bit of lawn here. I've left a lot of patches with those white clovers. I didn't mow that down for the pollinators. I have some more plants in that back bed there. And then I have this little circle that I have not mowed, and I've thrown in some more flowers in here, and it's really come together. This is the second year now I'm not mowing it, and the grass is so much taller than before. It looks really cool here in the middle of my lawn, and it creates a little habitat for insects and also for animals. I found a little bird nest right here that was full of eggs and little baby birds that had found a little spot here in the grass. Because if you think about it, look at this lawn right here, and the majority of lawns in the neighborhood, that's what they look like. So if a bird is really likes long grass and prefers that, they're kind of desperate for a location to create a little nest. And so I've created that for them. It's kind of a cool little place for them. Now this massive grapevine, I did not plant. This is a volunteer that started coming up the first year I moved in here. So now this is probably about 2 years old. And then these hostas below, they come back every year, and they were already planted here. But you know, this is just the beauty of not removing a plant you first see coming up. You might just see a couple leaves like that and be like, oh, I'm gonna pull that out. It's taking over my hosta area, but I left it. And it's a wild grapevine, but it's growing up huge, big and strong all the way along the fence of my pool here. And it's creating all these little clusters of what I'm hoping will be delicious grapes. We'll see exactly how they taste when they come to full ripeness, but I mean, it's worth a shot. What's the worst case scenario here? They don't taste good and I have to rip the whole thing out. That's fine, but I wouldn't do that anyway. I just look at the privacy aspect of it along that pool fence, and then hopefully I get something delicious and edible out of it as well. And here's another back corner of the yard, and this is a massive mulberry tree, and it actually has some mulberries on it that are starting to ripen, and I'll go up close to those. Oh yeah, look at that. They are starting to turn a darker color. They're gonna turn a really dark before they're ready to pick and eat, but they're pretty small, but they're still tasty, and you could bake them into stuff and just, you know, eat them however you want. Now on this back wall, when I first came in, there wasn't anything along the fence, and the grass was kind of not growing well next to the back wall there. And so I planted these native flowering flowers that I took from the front of this property and just transplanted those to new locations. Now over here, I've planted some elephant ears that are gonna come up. Those will not come back every single year without you taking out the bulb from the ground, because it'll freeze too hard here. But I think that'll be a really cool look to have elephant ears here. And then with the more sunny area of the lawn here, I have these native flowers that were here last year, and I just left them. You can see the stalks here of those flowers, and they're coming back again this year, even more vigorous, strong, and thick. Now behind these flowers is kind of what this whole area looked like before. It was just this creeping, I think it's in the mint family, that was encroaching in this whole area of lawn, and there were a bunch of open patches like that. And by putting a bunch of flowers here, it really created a nice look to the edge of the lawn. This is one of my fig trees that I brought a cutting of from California, and I started a few of those fig trees. This is one I kept in a pot. Others I put in ground, but he's doing really well. Look at that. And then I have a few others. I have a big one here, and I have another one over here, and I have actually, hey Finde, on the other side of the property over here, I have a bunch of fig trees right over there, and these are blueberry plants right here. I have some citrus in there as well, and then I have this whole line of what I'm hoping will come. Sunflowers come in really well, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 peach trees right there as well. So this whole back area, obviously I've left a lot of these white clovers for the pollinators, as I said before, but I have this whole bed right along the edge of the house, which was just nothing before. It was a pretty weedy area, and I filled it in with a couple sunflowers the first year, and now a ton of them are coming back as volunteers, you can see. But I've also added in here again some more radishes in here, some carrots, a bunch of little strawberry plants. I have some flowers that I put in, and this is where I planted 2 of my fig trees, one there and one there. And this was kind of a risky thing to do in this climate because they were adapted to California, and I wasn't sure how they would survive the winter. And they didn't survive the winter for the most part up top, but down below, you can see there's some new growth there. So this fig tree did partially survive. I've seen people in my type of climate cut back fig trees down to about a couple inches in the ground, and that's how they successfully do it. I left these because I just was experimenting, but this one's coming back even better. You can see all those leaves there, and we'll see how this does second year. You know, I'll at least get some cuttings off this and put more in pots, just like I did with that other one over there. Here's a look at that bed, and this is some of the crimson clover that's coming up on the edge here, another sunflower, and I'm gonna have tons of sunflowers in this bed. I think it's gonna be a cool look. And you don't even need to put in beds like that to create a nice garden. You can just do it right in your lawn. You can put in elderberry trees like this, which grow super easily. This is a second year growth elderberry tree, and look at this. I think this is all from just this year. The green growth right here, which grows so fast, and this is already just, you know, early summer here in May that one's growing. I have another one up here, and the cool thing with elderberry trees is they'll send out new little shoots down here at the base like that, and you can take that and you can transplant them. So now I put another one in right here. This one's gonna come up hopefully thick and strong, and then another one right there, and then I'll have a line of elderberry trees here. And then I have a few peach trees that I planted here. They were bare root trees that I got from the county for a really good deal, and they're just starting to put out some little buds here, so I'm excited to see the growth on those. Now this is where I have a ton of potatoes planted, and I have a lot of other things planted in here as well, but this goes all the way down my fence line. It's gonna be a massive harvest of potatoes. But up here where the bed has ended, I just put an old rotting pumpkin here, and look at all of these pumpkins that are coming up. I'm just gonna let them do their thing. Obviously this is, you know, by traditional plant spacing standards, this is horrible because they're growing on top of each other. But hey, let's just see what happens. Let's experiment here in the garden. And this is a radish that's coming up and starting to flower. This is as well. It almost looks like broccoli, but that's actually a radish that's sending out little you know, seed pod heads that are going to turn into flowers. Here was another experiment that has actually worked out really well. This was my corn from last year, all these little corn stalks, and I planted these sweet peas at the base of them, and they've grown up beautifully. Actually, I did this all the way down the bed. There's some here that are growing up, and this one's actually producing a little pea pod that's a sugar snap pea. Look at that. Take a bite. And that's tasty. And I also have in this bed planted other things like garlic and more of those perennial onions, Egyptian walking onions, but the potatoes have really come in strong and kind of, you know, almost overcrowding other stuff, but it's still existing, it's still surviving there. And on the back of the bed, I put these Jerusalem artichokes. They create this stalk that grows really tall and produces a flower, and they have an edible tuber under the ground, kind of like a potato, I've heard, but we'll see how those taste. And then this is a perennial flower that the bees love, and I've actually taken little cuttings of this out from the base here and then transplanted that in this bed in other areas of the garden too. So that's something I'm doing to just really low cost way to spread flowers around your yard. Now here I have a tomato plant, and these have been mostly volunteers, and I'm hoping I can just send that tomato plant around this log and then have him grow up this homemade trellis that I built. And I also have a few of those sweet peas that are starting to grow up the other side of this trellis. This is, you know, you don't have to go to a big box store and spend a lot of money on stuff. Look at this, it's just one main stick right here and then a log down there. This was actually a big branch, had a bunch of other stems coming off of it, and those are all going up to this center point here where I tied them with string, and that's going to support a bunch of food that's going to grow on top of it. Here's some more of my potatoes here, and something kind of cool is the potatoes produce these little flowers. They almost look kind of tropical, exotic. They have that little green little point coming out of them. They look like a hummingbird might like them, but they produce a little berry that's about the size of a cherry tomato, and the clusters here, they actually look similar to what tomatoes produce because potatoes and tomatoes are related. But down here at the base, I have some more garlic, right here. And then on the very end, I have some more of these Jerusalem artichokes, which have grown really fast. Oh, and I also filled in the gaps where in between these artichokes with corn, and I don't see any coming up here, but on the very end where there was more sun, it was coming up. I put it in kind of late, so we'll see if it comes up. But look, everything's kind of an experiment here. I have a lot going on, obviously, but I think I kind of ran out of time to do the front yard, so we'll keep it at the backyard for now.